Today, I thought I would go over some creative workflow hacks, specifically talk about a monthly planning tool that I use with some of our high skill accounts. Creative analysis should change based on the time frame. You have to look into that demographic data because it challenges assumptions and it also gives you better context into why things are working or who they're working with. Anyone in this line of work is probably a little bit guilty of having a bunch of unorganized ideas they'd like to test one day, and then that just gets lost in the ether of your TikTok favorites. So one thing that I love doing is I love working with Pilothouse because while we are a performance marketing agency, we really pride ourselves on caring so much about brand and creative. At Pilothouse, we don't just make ads, we craft them. Every edit, every word, every scroll-stopping detail is built with purpose and care, and I truly believe that care drives creativity and creativity drives results. Our attention to both scale and brand allows us to craft strategies that deliver you short-term results while making you long-term successful, which is so important for any DTC brand. If you are curious about learning more about working with Pilothouse, you can fill out a lead form at pilothouse.co and let them know you want to go on a brand new ad venture. You don't actually have to say that. You don't have to make a pun. I'm not going to force you to make a pun. Just fill out the lead form. We'd love to chat with you. Hey, welcome back to Ad-venturous, the podcast produced by DTC and hosted by me, Aves. Today, I thought we would do another really tactical episode. I'm trying to just sort of pump these out to give you guys enough time to implement some of these ideas and these strategies before we're in like the throes of Q4, because then it's too late. So yeah, today I thought I would go over some creative workflow hacks and specifically talk about a monthly planning tool that I use with some of our high skill accounts over at Pilothouse, and the rest of our team uses pretty regularly as well. And just sort of walk you guys through everything that I analyze specifically on a month over month basis. I find that sort of creative analysis should change based on the time frame. That doesn't feel like a super crazy niche thing to say, but yeah, I thought we would start with these monthly lookbacks because I think it would be really helpful if you don't have any tool like this that you use or any strategy for analyzing creative performance, to do this for sort of November, December, October of last year. Really helpful to kind of understand again what performed, what didn't, and create some hypotheses around them. So yeah, I think we can just sort of get into it. I think that a big part of successful content is strategy. Why are we showing that specific piece of creative to someone? Who is that person? Why do we know that that piece of content will actually work and actually be exciting for them? I see sometimes when I'm talking to brands, this like really high investment on that strategy side where it's like, okay, we know exactly who we want to talk to. We know what matters to them. We've poured thousands and thousands of dollars into research. But then when it comes to what is that saying? Like the rubber meeting the road? Is that it? I guess so. It's like wheels. But when the rubber meets the road, like I see a lot of brands who just don't know what to do with all of that big strategic thinking. And that's honestly, I think, just a gap in how we've thought about creative marketing and advertising and where we are now and how much content is required. I think that a lot of sort of creative focused agencies fall into this pitfall of being heavy-handed on the strategy side and then having little to no idea how to actually implement these ideas into a content workflow that is going to produce a high volume of creative and also a high level of diversity, which we talked about last week. So different styles, different types. So it's like when you have everything ready to go for like a really nice, lovely, perfect night in, like you've done your laundry, bed sheets are clean, cute PJs, you've got like Uber Eats on the way, and your iPad is fully charged. And then you remember that you actually have plans with friends and it's miserable and it's terrible and you can't enjoy that perfect night in. That to me is akin to when I see all this effort being put in on the strategic side, which is really important, but then there's just no concept on how to actually execute this across different platforms. So yeah, I say this a lot, but creativity, especially in this context, marketing and advertising, is not an accident. but more of a muscle that you can train and work out and it'll get stronger and better. I think that the ability to consistently pump out relevant, strategic, and engaging content, like I said, is not an accident. It's not just a skill that people are born with. It's something that you can learn and you sort of have to get the reps in to be able to do it well. So, yeah, let's just kind of dive in, talk about how I keep that muscle exercised and getting stronger. I think, like, as a takeaway, just to kind of again set the stage for the rest of the episode, I really want you to be able to, like I said, use this new tool or something similar that works for you so that you can find sort of net new content ideas. That's the true hope for this one. I will also say, I'm going to do my best to describe how I use this sort of workflow and creative monthly look back tool that I created. I'm going to do my best to explain it to you, but I will also be posting a link to a version you can use on my LinkedIn. So you guys will be able to actually use it and see it. But like I said, I'll do my best to describe it and I'll sort of describe the theory behind it. And then, yeah, you guys can head over to LinkedIn, grab the link from there and use it, edit it, dupe it, however you'd like. Before we get into the monthly planning tool, I did want to mention sort of how I manage daily to-do lists and like daily content production goals. So I know I also talk about my iPad all the time, but I am going to talk about my iPad a lot in this episode because it does really help me with my planning and workflows. But on a daily basis, I think to-do lists are really, really important. And you'll see this reflected in how I plan out content on a monthly basis, whether it's like responding to emails, writing a LinkedIn post, whatever. I put everything that I need to get done in a day in a to-do list because if I don't write it down, I will forget. And for me, I do this on my iPad with my Apple Pencil because something about actually writing down the task is really helpful for my brain. I can't just like type it out. I don't know why. It's the actual act of like crossing it down with a pencil really helpful to me. But I feel like it's important to mention that I don't tend to write like one really long, disorganized list. What I find really helpful is to break things down by brand and then by content type on a daily basis. So, say I have like 5 pieces of creator content I'm briefing, I'm going to brief out or create myself like 5 different video ads that day, and then I'm creating or briefing out 5 different static ads. I'll sort of break all that up. I find this particularly useful when you are working in a creative capacity because it's really functional for you to do a lot of the same work bulked together. So if you're briefing out a ton of creator content, instead of sort of going back and forth between briefs and getting things done in the background, I try to really sort of get everything done at one time that is specific to that type of content. Again, it's just like really functional and it's a nice thing to do for your brain. So that's really easy. And then I also, as I said, will write down like other sort of responsibilities or facets of my job on that same to-do list and then just sort of like I said break it out by like type of job. So whether that's responding to emails or following up with like a SaaS vendor, that's the type of stuff that will live in a sort of different area of the to-do list. But for the actual content side, like I said, break it down into types. I find that really helpful. And then I'll also break it down into like iterations if I'm making the same type of video for multiple different products. Again, this is just all my own stuff, so hopefully it's helpful for you. But I do find it really helpful, like I said, to have this monthly look back and monthly tool and then these daily ones as well to make things really bite-sized and easy to get through on a daily basis. And then it also really holds me accountable. I talked about this last week, but it is really important right now to have not only just high volume on specifically top of funnel channels like Pinterest, Meta, all of those guys that are really helping with NCAC. You want to have a lot of content. And so building a lot of content takes a lot of organization, and building a lot of strategic content takes like a whole system. So that daily part is just a small part of this overall monthly system. But zooming out now, let's talk about the monthly ads planner because I feel like I've been teasing it and it is actually very exciting to me to talk about, which is really kind of loser behavior, but I do love it. Having a monthly ads planner is a really great idea for any brand for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it helps you plan. Duh. That's easy. Number two, it sort of forces brainstorming time every month, which can get lost when things get really busy, especially in Q3 and Q4. But it's really important to prioritize this time to brainstorm by yourself, hopefully with a team. It's more fun when you do it that way. And number three, it also serves as a monthly look back at what has worked, what hasn't worked from the previous month or a last year comp. So it kind of holds a lot of different values to it, which is again why it's so important to have something like this in your workflow and have something that's be part of your system. In my opinion, like this type of monthly ads planner, it just is my system at this point for creating high levels of content, but you might have something else going on. This might just be part of that. I built the framework for the monthly ads planner. Like I said, I'll post a link on LinkedIn so you can use it as well. But I built this framework kind of out of necessity and experience, which are two of my favorite ingredients, to be honest. Usually I feel like things born out of necessity and experience are actually really functional, and we really do need functionality in this industry. There's a lot of non-functional things going on in the tech space in general. So good to have something that actually works. But I wanted to create a system that would empower creative teams to do exactly what I said, make a large volume of very strategic content. Before I walk through the actual monthly ads planner here, I just wanted to remind y'all that if you need help building the strategic side, so figuring out who you're talking to, why you're talking to, what is the size of the prize, getting all your segmentation down, or if you just need help with the executional side and actually, like I said, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly, putting the rubber to the road, then reach out, head over to the Pilothouse website like today, fill out a lead form so that you came from this, and we will chat directly about how we can really get your content flowing for Q4 and beyond. Everyone's saying it. Creative is like the most important ingredient right now to growth and scale for any DTC brand. Content is everything. So if your content isn't shored up, even if your product is wonderful, your founder story is incredible, it does not matter because people with more engaging, more exciting content than you are going to succeed faster. That's just a quick plug. Like I said, go to the Pilothouse website, fill out that lead form so you came from Adventurous and we can chat directly. But back to this monthly planning tool. Like I said, very excited, very nerdy to be talking about this. I'm going to go in sort of like sequential order, like how you tackle everything in the tool. Going to go through it from left to right is how I'm thinking about it because I'm looking at the tool itself right now. But I start with a review of data from the previous month. So sometimes I look at just if we're planning for October, I'll look at all of September. I also typically will look at October of last year to see what was working then. We're basically just looking at top ads, bottom ads, and then what I call spicy ads. I will explain that later, and digging into the data. So I'm not just looking at sort of basic KPIs, click through rate, cost per click, ROAS. I tend to dig into a lot of engagement data as well when I am doing these monthly planning sessions. And I'll also look at who these ads performed with and also specifically for Meta, what placements they were working on. So was this heavily featured on Instagram? You know, is this like a Reels runaway winner? What are we looking at here? So I look at platform, I look at demographic data as well, and then I just look at all of our actual KPIs. That sort of will vary from brand to brand, but typically the same. So by actually sort of breaking all this apart and looking at it one time, I find that I can challenge any hypotheses that might exist around product and persona match. So yeah, I can challenge myself in any sort of assumptions that I've made previously. Say I'm selling a phone case like this one, very cute, has a little lamb on it. Loewe, shout out to Loewe, love her. But say I'm selling this phone case, and my assumption is that it's going to perform very well with women in their mid 20s, but it ends up performing really well with men 40 plus. And that's who's actually clicking on the ad. That's who's actually maybe purchasing through that ad. So that's going to bring up a lot of questions for me as I'm analyzing why an ad has worked or hasn't worked. One common sort of thread to pull out, if that was the situation, you think it's going to do well with like a certain demographic of women and it ends up doing well with men, might just be that you have a pretty lady in the ad and they're clicking on it. It might just be that they are gifting that product. So there's lots to sort of uncover and look at there, and definitely always worth digging into the type of demographic data for that exact reason. If you don't do that, so say I had this ad, it's like someone just like holding up their phone case, so cute, and it just looks like it's doing well, and I don't go beyond sort of what I'm seeing in Northbeam as far as like general KPIs. Northbeam is just one example. Could be motion, could be ads manager directly. But say I'm just looking at like actual numbers and I'm not looking at that demographic side, I won't pick up on the context that that ad might be working because it's gifting focused. So I'm losing out on opportunity to then make a gifting version of that ad. Or maybe I want to actually have that piece of content land with the target demo I was hoping to see it land with. So maybe I'll sort of restart it, relaunch it with a net new audience, won't put it in Advantage Plus. Like there's lots of things to do. I'm not going to list them all because then this episode would get out of control. But that is why you have to look into that demographic data, because it challenges assumptions and it also gives you better context into why things are working or who they're working with. Over here at Pilothouse, we do have some like secret sauce ingredients in how we test creative that I'm not going to like spill all the beans on right now. I feel like saying ingredients and beans is not really making that clear, but just saying I'm moving on from sort of how we go about testing and how I might double click into those things and moving into other parts of this planner. So why I like adding this monthly checkpoint in is because it's really nice to block off time to evaluate those bigger trends. Again, if I'm just looking week over week at performance and how we're testing that ad of the phone case, I'm going to miss all that context completely. So yeah, starting with that data download of everything that worked and didn't work from the month before is really helpful to sort of establish what happened and what we want to happen next. I also, like I said, include what I call spicy ads. So say our North Star for performance on an account is cost per acquisition. That is the number one thing that we look at. I'll also go in and look at ads that maybe didn't quite meet the mark specifically on NCAC, but potentially generated a ton of clicks and just not a lot of conversions, or maybe generated a ton of engagement and social proof. This is really important because I like to know what's going on at all times with everything. Obviously, because I made this monthly planner, but also seriously, I find this kind of analysis more valuable most of the time than just looking at top and bottom ads, because looking at what I call spicy ads, that starts to really get the creative juices flowing, and it starts to force you to figure out how to either make those ads better or figure out how to avoid sort of what makes them bad next time around. When you start looking at like spicy ads, it presents you with actual problems to tackle through your creative. So you're no longer just creating content to announce a sale or say launch a new product. You're creating content to specifically solve an issue in performance, sort of laid out by previous content. It's all very symbiotic and nice and cool in practice. So after the whole team reviews the performance sections and we look at top ads, bottom ads, spicy ads, all of that, we really tend to, at least in my teams, we work to really, again, like digest and analyze together instead of just, myself, if I'm pulling all this data, coming to the table and saying, this is why I think X, Y, and Z happened, really making it an open forum discussion to say, this is my idea. What do you guys think is going on? Really helpful to just get everyone talking in that section, even if we're just reviewing this month or past period data. So one thing that I love doing is creating like a Slack channel for brands specifically, or like a group chat where we all just bomb in every idea we see out there in the wild when we're all scrolling. I think that anyone in this line of work is probably a little bit guilty of having like a bunch of unorganized ideas that they'd like to test one day, and then that just gets lost in the ether of your TikTok favorites. That's definitely happened to me a lot. But what I like to do now is house all of those ideas I find within the month in these monthly ads planner documents that I create. It takes like 5 seconds to throw in a link into your monthly planner, and then you don't lose it, and it'll actually get made and then get you paid, which is a fun little line. Get that content made so you get paid. It'll be my new like sign off. So yeah, I do split those ideas into 2 categories though within this monthly ads planner. So iterative ideation and contrast ideation. I think it's really important to break these two out. So number one, it's not overwhelming and you don't just like open your monthly ads planner and there's like 1,000 ideas in there and they're super unorganized. Typically, and I think this is probably true of anyone who is sort of in the content space, when you see an idea, you don't just save something down with no idea how to make it relevant for your brand. You usually have a little bit of an idea of how you'd like to execute it. So I usually just add those notes. Again, whether it's iterative based on something that's already working or completely new, contrasting, I have those two separated out and we just bomb ideas in there. I think it's important, again, to do that because it does help with sort of the next stages of planning. I'll get into that when I get there. If you're doing these types of monthly planning calls and going over this monthly planning tool with a team, I think that one thing that's really important is to protect this time where everyone is going through ideas that they've added to the board or to the columns. I think it's important that everyone sort of presents their own contributions. So, say you and I are working together, you put in 5 ads, I put in 2, making sure that you're going over those 5 ads and telling us why you think they'd be relevant to the brand and why you want to make them. Really important. Sometimes it's really quick and easy too. It's like, this would be funny and it's sort of similar to something already working. And it's like, got it. But sometimes I do find when we're kind of bringing things to the table in this way, it's really helpful because everyone can then pitch in and make the idea for execution even better. So I feel like it was just last week or maybe the week before I was using the expression to kill your darlings, and I'm gonna use it again because this point in the sort of planning document is when we start to kill our darlings. So we all get really excited, we go over all these cool ideas we found, and then we start to approach the actual sort of content planning and delivery execution plans for the month. When I do this type of exercise, I create this as a baseline. So this is the bare minimum amount of content that's going to be flowing through the account. What I look to establish in these planning tools is the like foundation of the account for the month. So most likely every time, I'm pretty sure 99% of the months that I've ever used one of these, I overproduce content when we start to see performance settle in throughout the month. After week 1, week 2, week 3, it's kind of bananas to put everything in stone and then only stick to that plan. You need to be really agile when you start to see stuff working, say your sales ending, like making some tweaks, iterations, all that. I've talked about that before. So yeah, just keep that in mind. This tool for me is used as a baseline of the content that needs to be made. And then there'll be a bunch more that just slows the account as performance starts to kind of shake out. So I tend to focus the actual planning part of these calls and this tool on like product launches, sale moments, relevant holidays, anything that's based on like the actual marketing calendar and anything that I just know is going to come up. So any like seasonality moments, things like that. Just again, establishing that baseline to make sure that you have everything you need foundationally before you start like responding to performance through creative. Part of this process is also taking the time to go through your projected spend for the month and deciding what you want to allocate where. So this is sort of where that like high level strategy will come into play, but really looking at how you're breaking down ads. And the example that I'll show you guys, I'll also post a screen recording on LinkedIn along with a link to the tool just to make it a little bit easier. But most of the brands, all of the brands that I work with, we like completely understand who our target personas are and we've segmented to a T. So when we look at performance, we bucket things into what performed with what persona slash segment. And when we look to plan, we also look at, what segment might need a little more TLC. So say back to that stupid phone case example, say we're seeing like huge success with men 40 plus for the Little Lamb cute Loewe limited edition phone case. Say that's working really well with 40 plus year old men, but we know that there's a lot of legs to that product with women in their mid 20s. So when I'm looking at performance, I'm seeing that content from the last month didn't really hit with that specific segment. I'm going to allocate more budget to testing creative that's relevant for them. Hopefully this is making sense. It's so like conceptual without the actual tool in front of you, but I'm basically just trying to say this is a really important time in your sort of creative development system and process to think about where the money should be spent and what the priorities on the account are. You might be in a situation where it's like, okay, you know what? The middle-aged dudes actually love Loewe, they love the phone case. That's fine. It's acquiring super efficiently. Maybe they're gifting, who knows? But we don't actually feel like as a brand our priority is appealing to women in their mid-20s, then that's fine. We're not going to spend more money to acquire them because that typically is a more expensive audience as well. We're going to have to do a lot more contrast testing, which is going to cost more money. So let's just stick with the dudes 40 plus who like this cute little phone case. That's all good. You have to really understand the strategy behind where your brand's going to make those calls. But like I said, really important to actually make those calls consciously, because what I've found, and I am the type of person who's worked on high scale brands where we're shipping like 75 to 100 pieces of unique content a week into a single ad account. If I don't do this kind of work, and if you don't do this kind of work, the creative will get away from you in a way, and you'll become less and less attached to your strategy because you're just making content in a very responsive nature. So, taking the time, going through all of this, figuring out where you want to spend your money at the beginning of the month, really important to make sure that you are sort of covering all your bases and heading in the direction that you want to be heading towards according to your strategy. And again, this is just an exercise in baselines. So by all means, like figure out where that minimum spend threshold is. What are your sort of projected numbers? Who do you want to spend that money testing content on? And then from there, you can start to plan week by week, which is what I do, what sort of baseline content you will be creating. And this is kind of the fun part because you take everything from that brainstorming section and you start to prioritize things that feel the highest confidence to you, which is, I think, fun. You're kind of killing your darlings in a way, but it's a fun group effort to figure out like, what do we have the most confidence in? What do we think is going to do the best? And what aligns the most to our sort of persona strategy and where we are right now in our brand's life cycle. If you're thinking that all of this sounds like a lot of effort, then you are absolutely right. But it does take a lot of effort to succeed nowadays and to see the kind of scale that you're like excited and envious about and interacting with. It takes a lot of effort. And like I said, when you don't do this kind of thing, when you don't have this system for content planning in place, things just get away from you and you end up creating for the sake of creating and you're making things, like I mentioned, in a very reactive way, which typically doesn't actually align to an overall strategy and it doesn't help you get closer towards your end goals most of the time. The last part that I will talk about, I know that was already a lot. You might be thinking, whoa, girl, did you not just go over how to plan out what pieces of content you're going to be delivering week by week? Yeah, I did do that. A couple next steps, though, after I do that, is if you're working with a larger team, go in and assign everything to someone who makes sense for that. So if you have like a video editor on your team, whatever it is, make sure that you assign the content, you go over it week by week. Everybody knows what they're responsible for delivering each week. I feel like I just said week a lot, but that's how it's going to happen when we're talking about content planning. I also tend to, if I'm working with a team, really consider people's capacity, say moving into Q4, and try to almost like underestimate. Again, this is a foundation, this is a baseline of the content that needs to be created to help us move towards our goals from a strategy point of view. There's going to be like space for reactive content in the mix as well. So really making sure that you're thinking about not like overburdening people in this planning document and making too many pieces of content per week. You want to make sure that it's realistic, it's going to get done, and then it aligns to your overall strategy. The next part of this, beyond sort of assigning everything and making sure that the team is aligned and we're all good to go, once that's all sewed up with a bow, I tend to also fill out sort of a post-mortem on the month before. So, like I said, we started with all of these pieces of analysis, looking at top ads, bottom ads. If you run landing page testing, really good to look at landing pages as well. I didn't talk about that much at the front end of the call, but really important. I've mentioned this before, but at Pilothouse, we use a proprietary tool called Warp Drive that we built so that we can test landing pages at scale. So typically with our clients, we're also looking at what landing pages for kind of each product and persona have done the best. But anyway, we've digested all that data. We've looked at all our cool, kooky, fun, weird content ideas. We've planned it all out. It's all scoped out, ready to go. The next step is, like I mentioned, I usually do this solo as sort of a main operator on the content side, but I do a post-mortem on the month before. But I also like to do this sort of like almost solo and then have it living in the monthly planner so that I can constantly be reminded of it. Again, I like to know what's happening with everything at all times. I don't know if you noticed this yet. I'm a little bit type A. Love that for me. Love it for you. It's just really helpful to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes again. So when I talk about a postmortem, I mean that I really go in and look at what happened from a performance standpoint and a content delivery standpoint through a very non subjective lens. So, this is how I sort of organize my thoughts around the last month. And I do this again every month with every brand, or sometimes not even brands, just like work I've been doing. I love this tool. Let me just get into it. So I start with like an overall summary, really short, just a couple bullet points. And I really try again not to, at this point in the overall summary, talk about like performance metrics or anything. I just talk about how things went. So, say part of the goal for my make believe phone case brand was reaching men 40 plus. I would talk about how ads did reach that demographic. Maybe they weren't the top spenders in the ad account, but that's what happened. I just try to lay out what happened in the past month from a creative and content delivery standpoint in a very non subjective way. Next, I just note down any team initiated victories. So, what was in our control that we executed successfully? This is, again, a really important piece of planning and a really important piece of organization that really helps you understand like what led to your successes. So, what did the team do that was fully in their control that went really well? Next thing I talk about is team initiated opportunities. So, what was in our control that we executed sort of poorly? I find this also try to be as direct with yourself as possible. And if you do have like a larger team, this little postmortem doesn't have to live in the public board. But I just find it really helpful to say, okay, this was like in our control. Maybe we took our foot off the gas a little bit and we stopped making content relevant to those 40-plus-year-old guys who want cute little phone cases. Anything like that, where it's like maybe we missed deadlines for ad credits, or maybe we forgot to respond to some creators, like things that were totally in your control that just didn't go well. This is where I jot them down. Next, I talk about outside initiated victories. So this one's really interesting. What was not in your control that set you up for success? Maybe all of a sudden, I'm trying to think of like a male idol. Like, who do 40-year-old men really like? I don't know. Like Joe Rogan. Say Joe Rogan started using a phone case that was really cute and had little lambs on it. That was like not in your control at all, but it maybe most likely would have contributed to your ads doing really well with that sort of older male demographic. This is a really bad example and it's really gotten away from me. But yeah, that's sort of what I mean by outside initiated victories. Make sure to jot down what did set you up for success that was totally not in your control. What like pieces of culture started coming through that again, like you had no say in, but they helped your brand. Next thing would be outside initiated opportunities. So, a big sort of theme that I've seen with a lot of brands over the past couple months is obviously tariff issues and product holdups, not knowing what inventory is going to look like, those kind of things that are just not in your control but set you up for difficulties. Really good to note down. I'm not going to spoil why all this is good to note down, but again, just like quick bullet points: tariffs, couldn't reorder, low inventory, ran out of inventory in our top seller. Like those little bullet points, really helpful to color a picture for yourself in the future. And then I also just put some like key learnings down. So I try to look at all that information, summarize it, jot down a couple key learnings in bullet point form. And then finally, I'll do sort of next month, next steps. And I try to come up with some ideas on how to negate any of the specifically sort of team initiated opportunities or how to throw gas on things that went really well. I just try to formulate some next steps based on all of that information I've given myself. These postmortem sort of bullet point lists are really helpful to give you context when you're looking back at months in the future. Something that gets lost all the time is like learnings and why things happen the way that they did. We move so quickly. Like I said, we make so much content, but all in all, I have been doing this system for a long time. This entire document now takes me like 2 hours to put together, including pulling all the data and putting all my ideas in there, and then 1 hour for a call. So it's 3 hours in total, not that long. And it's so valuable because sometimes you'll go back, say, like November of last year, and I'll be looking at just the data. And so much happens. Like I said, we move so fast in this industry that sometimes you might forget to say, like, you ran out of stock on a key piece of your top selling bundle. So adding those little things into the list are just really helpful to actually give you a full painted picture. Because what I also find really helpful about this tool, this monthly planning tool, is that once you start getting into the swing of making them, you can just reflect on them in the future. So whether it's like a year over year comp, month over month comp, you have all of this really juicy information and context that you can reflect on all the time, which is just chef's kiss, a dream to me. And it just, yeah, it empowers you to make really strategic, smart decisions when it comes to product development, content development, PO, product orders. If you're looking back at performance for October of last year and you see your Halloween drop sold out very quickly in the postmortem, then you're going to order more. And sometimes you just forget those things and lose them because we're all so busy. So, yeah, that is my really big planning tool that I use every month for the brands that I work with. It is my little darling. I love it so much. And I will, like I said, share a screen recording actually walking through the tool, as well as a link to the tool. I'm going to share a link to a like templated version on Milanote. Personally, I do use Figma to kind of put this together in a slightly different way, but Milanote's a really easy to use tool. It's free. You guys can download it, like download the template and use it like the next day, which I really want you guys to do, hopefully, because like I said, it's really helpful. And this type of planning, it might seem like a lot, but it is what is required to do well and to scale a brand and to make content that works and fits in line with the strategy. So that was it. Kind of a nerdy episode. Fun for me though. I love this tool. Like I said, born out of like necessity and need. So really functional and not too much extra effort. And the extra effort that it does take like comes back to you tenfold in performance. That was it for today. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions about the tool, please let me know in the comments or reach out on LinkedIn. Really excited. Hopefully you guys use it and it's helpful. And I'll chat to you guys next week.